Order. Shaukat Adam to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Christian Joining, it's a real honour to serve under your chairship. Chair, honourable and right honourable members, the opening speech for today's important debate was written and completed yesterday. My arguments were factually and systematically constructed, and at the core of which was essentially the pursuit of truth with very little emotional rhetoric. I woke up this morning just before dawn, like millions of other Muslims around the world, to begin fasting for another day, with some food and some water. When news broke of yet another violation of yet another peace deal, as Israelis rained bombs on makeshift shelters, slaughtering men, women and children. Men, women and children who, may be like me, were preparing their day of fasting, only now never to see another sunset. The question is this, Madam Chair: have we provided these bombs, the parts for the aircrafts dropping these lethal bombs, and has our intelligence sharing led to the slaughter of a further 400 people last night? I beg the Minister today, please, not at this moment, I just want to make this moment. I beg the Minister today, please do not sit here and say we are doing everything we can, because that will be adding insult to injury. I agree, no one has openly called for the IDF to be given a Nobel Peace Prize in the Labour government. But indeed, when we haven't even summoned the Israeli ambassador to express our concerns or even contemplated economic sanctions, because in the words of our Foreign Minister, Israel remains an important ally. We have an important trading relationship worth £6.1 billion and involving 38,000 British jobs. The Minister further goes on to say, I am sorry, any discussions of sanction is just not correct. Can I just make a bit more progress? So, to the family of the children who were burnt alive last night, I am sorry. The government says we can't afford to lose the money. I'll give way to mine.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for bringing this very important and timely debate here today, and he's right to draw reference to the Israeli airstrikes that killed over 400 people last night, shattering the fragile ceasefire and violating international law. But he will also know that this is against a situation where for the last 2 weeks we have seen a siege and blockade of Gaza, denying food, water, electricity, which is collective punishment and a war crime in itself under international law. Would you agree with me that the silence of the international community is unacceptable? It is not a choice. The international community, including the UK, have obligations under international law, and the UK government must enact those by putting immediate sanctions on Israel.
I thank my honourable member for that intervention. I concur completely. In the words of Martin Luther King, we remember in the end not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So with that backdrop, let us continue. Because as mentioned, Madam Chair, today's debate has been secured on no other premise but to find the truth. At this moment, the very global order we helped build stands on the precipice of collapse. If we, as one of its architects, fail to uphold the principles that we set up, we will also be complicit in its destruction. No one voted me in or expects us to resolve the conflict in the Middle East overnight, single-handedly. But what the British people do demand, in their millions, rightfully and unequivocally, is moral clarity, a strategic commitment to ending hostilities, and the absolute assurance that our nation is not complicit in facilitating war crimes. Today's debate will not delve into the historical archives of the conflict dating back from Balfour onwards, the Nakba, the occupation and the consistent humiliation, the Hamas atrocities of October 7th. Instead, it is a legal and moral inquiry into our nation's military cooperation with Israel in the face of credible allegations, including genocide, now before the International Court of Justice. The ICJ has ruled that the occupation is illegal and is also warned that Israel's actions in Gaza may constitute genocide. Under international law, the UK has an obligation not only to refrain from facilitating these crimes, but to prevent them actively. Yet, despite this duty, our country continues to engage in military cooperation with Israel. The question before us, Minister, is very clear. Are we upholding the rule of law? I will be quick.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Does he not accept that the government has introduced arms export licence suspensions, which particularly target any weapons that might be of British origin that would be used in Gaza, but is attempting to balance that with the needs of the IDF to defend itself against acts of aggression, for instance, the Iranian missile attacks in other theatres in which the IDF is operating?
I thank the member for the intervention, and that is something I will be leading on to now on the next stage. So the question is this very clear. Are we upholding the rule of law, or are we complicit in its erosion? Members, too often we speak in numbers. Tens of thousands are dead, millions have been displaced. But as the saying goes, a single death is a tragedy, a million deaths a statistic. So before we proceed, I want us to all pause, not to cite figures, but to honour lives lost, and in two specifically. Shaban al-Dalwi, a 19-year-old software engineering student who had already been displaced 5 times. The eldest of 5 siblings, he had memorized the entire Quran and was just away from his 20th birthday when an Israeli airstrike hit the Al-Aqsa hospital compound. The world witnessed the horrific image of Shaban attached to an IV bag, his body burning alive. His mother, the woman who had nurtured his every single dream, was killed alongside him. For a crumb of solace, they were buried together in an embrace. Who can forget the face of Hind Rajab, a 6-year-old girl who was trapped in a car with 5 of her dead relatives, their bodies riddled with bullets? The whole world has heard her call for help, a voice scared but full of hope. Rescuers from the Palestinian Red Crescent Society responded. Unfortunately, they too were killed. These are not statistics. These are human lives. Please do take time to look at their faces. And the question before us again is, did we as a nation facilitate these crimes? In following from this, in September 2024, our own government acknowledged that Israel was at clear risk of not complying with international humanitarian law and admitted there was a risk that UK arms exports might be used to commit serious violations. And yet, according to Campaign Against Arms Trade, potentially £100 million worth of military equipment has been approved for export to Israel, including spare parts for F-35 fighter jets. Jets that require continuous maintenance to remain operational, therefore constantly requiring spare parts. Furthermore, exports of F-35 parts are covered under what we call an open general license, which allows unlimited exports to all approved partners worldwide. Hence, we will never know the real numbers. Now, given that more than 15% of every F-35 is made in the UK, Israeli airstrikes would simply not be possible without British components.
Thank the member for giving way and bringing such an important debate. It was horrifying, heart-wrenching to wake up this morning to see more than 400 innocent Palestinians being killed, along with them children as well, bringing the death toll to over 48,000. Would the member now agree with me that Israel is not using weapons to defend itself, but rather using them against innocent Palestinians, and it's about time that government took action to stop selling arms so that international law can be prevented from being broken any further?
I thank the honourable member for that intervention. In addition to the 400, we have seen close numbers of 50,000 Palestinians being killed, majority of whom are women and children. So in addition to the manufacturer supplying F-35 parts, it appears that RAF Marham in Norfolk has been used at least 7 times to send spare parts directly to Israel. Since declaring a so-called suspension of arms exports, the UK has issued 34 new licences, including those for essential aircraft components. So I asked the Minister directly, which licences were suspended in September 2024, which licences remain suspended, and why has the government refused to publish details of arms exports between July and September 2024? Furthermore, our military cooperation extends beyond arms sales. It is operational, especially using our airbase in Akrotiri, Cyprus. In 1 year alone, from December 2023 to November 2024, the UK conducted 645 surveillance and recon missions, which amounts to almost 2 flights a day. Interestingly, during the same period, the US moved heavy transport aircraft carrying military equipment to Akrotiri, and the RAF subsequently conducted daily cargo flights from Akrotiri to Tel Aviv. Now, we have been told that these flights are for surveillance and for hostage rescue. But if that is the case, then we must ask this question. Why did we use RAF Atlas C-1 aircraft, which are large enough to transport military vehicles and helicopters? Were we involved directly? I'll give way.
Would the honourable member not accept that if we, in the unlikely event that RAF transport aircraft have been carrying something as large as a helicopter or a military vehicle from Cyprus to Israel, which is the first time I've ever heard that allegation made, that we might have seen evidence of such helicopters or military vehicles of British provenance? The Israeli Defence Forces have no need of such equipment. They have far more equipment than the British Armed Forces do.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. That is the question that I will wish to be answered. So were we involved directly or indirectly in the Israeli operation in Nusra in June 2024, when 276 Palestinians were killed at the rescue of 4 Israeli hostages? And critically, has our intelligence been used to conduct airstrikes? If so, under Article 25 of the Rome Statute, is the UK now legally complicit in war crimes?
Would the member give way?
I will give way.
Would my honourable friend agree that allying with Israel, while it carries out a genocide, will bring about the end of the international world order as we know it?
I thank the honourable member for his timely intervention. I concur completely. Now, the government claims that it only provides intelligence when it is satisfied that it will be used in compliance with international law. But what independent due diligence has been conducted to verify this? What have we in fact witnessed if hundreds of UK flights have taken place over Gaza? And in fact, what crimes, if any, have we seen ourselves? In light of this morning, why has the RAF continued to deploy Shadow R1 surveillance flights towards Gaza amid the ceasefire, with the stipulation of the ceasefire explicitly forbidding surveillance operations? Is this not in fact a violation of the spirit of the ceasefire agreement? And can the Minister confirm that the Israeli armed forces will not use surveillance supplied by the RAF flights during hostage exchange in future attacks on Gaza? This war has taken the lives of an unprecedented number of aid workers too, including 3 British nationals killed while working with the World Central Kitchen humanitarian convoy. Their families have repeatedly requested video footage from our own Shadow R1 surveillance aircrafts, which was operating above Gaza at the time. The government has refused to release it. Similarly, on May 27th, when at least 45 Palestinians were killed in Rafah, another UK surveillance aircraft was in operation. Again, the footage has not been released. Why? What is being hidden, if anything? And if we are confident in our innocence, why the secrecy? And finally, we must address Gibraltar. There is now mounting suspicion and evidence that UK facilities in Gibraltar are being used for the facilitation of arms shipments, harbour services and jet fuel supplies for vessels transporting weapons from the US to Israel. Can the Minister please clarify the usage of Gibraltar in the war effort? In conclusion, Madam Chair, we must confront the bigger picture. The UK helped build the modern international legal order, but we risk dismantling it today. International law is not a game of pick and mix, where we enforce it in one case, namely African despots, and ignore it in another. But allowing Israeli exceptionalism, we threaten to undermine the very concept of international law itself. Thank you.
Can I remind members they should bob if they wish to be called in the debate? And can I ask you to possibly keep to an informal limit of about 3.5 minutes, please? Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Ms Jardine. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. And I congratulate the honourable member for Leicester South for bringing this timely debate. We're at a time where we need to consider the potential vicarious liability of the UK state in the military activities in Palestine and the Middle East. Ms Jardine, the murder of over 400 Palestinians in Gaza last night must outrage us all. The past fortnight has seen the passage of aid through Israeli checkpoints denied, leaving the Palestinian population in Gaza with less food, less water and fewer vital medical supplies. Israel's rejection of the ceasefire and its extreme military action overnight has escalated the killing of civilians, including women and children in Gaza. And it's a reasonable assumption that these airstrikes will have been conducted with, at least in part, F-35s, which the UK continues to manufacture parts for and supply maintenance parts for. And perhaps the Minister can clarify whether they were used, and they have, and on previous occasions. And despite the partial suspension of arms export licences to Israel, the government has left a deliberate loophole in place, allowing exports of F-35 parts to Israel via the global spare parts pool. In addition, the government has issued at least a further 34 arms export licences to Israel since the original suspension, more than it had originally blocked. And according to new arms export licensing data published by the Campaign Against Arms Trade, the data shows that this government approved an open licence for components for combat aircraft. This licence appears to be incompatible with its supposed commitment not to supply military equipment that could be used in Gaza. And we've been made aware from the reports of the High Court case between Al-Haq and the Business and Trade Secretary that the government continued sending F-35 fighter jet components to Israel despite knowing that there was a clear risk that they could be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of the international humanitarian law, the High Court has been told. I'll certainly give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Would he accept that it's more likely that F-35s were in use to shoot down Iranian drones, cruise missiles and other projectiles that were fired at Israel? This is a system or a platform that Israel needs to use to defend itself, and it's faced two of the largest barrages of weapons fired at civilian targets ever in post-World War II history.
I thank the honourable member for that intervention. Israel, as he's mentioned on several occasions, is perfectly entitled to defend itself against Iranian attacks in that way. They could have all the arms that they would wish. They have the protection of other people from around that region. But the prerequisite is that it observes international humanitarian law in respect of the Palestinian people, that it vacates the illegally occupied West Bank if those are the conditions upon which it should be receiving support. Chair, since the government announced its partial suspension of arms export licences but maintained exports to the F-35 global supply pool, I've asked in the Chamber, in Westminster Hall and in written questions whether the government is engaging in discussion with F-35 partner nations on whether the supply of F-35s and spare parts to Israel could be suspended. There's been no effort to address this matter in this House other than to claim the government cannot take action on the global spares pool without bringing the F-35 programme into peril, which would have implications for international peace and security. Preventing UK arms exports, specifically F-35 jets which are dropping £2,000 bombs on Gaza with UK-made components, from being used in war crimes by Israel against Palestinians is in no way a threat to international security in Ukraine or elsewhere. The US and the UK have actively constructed a false dichotomy where the lives of Palestinians are pitted against the lives of other civilians. continuing to transfer F-35 components to Israel is in violation of the UK's domestic and international legal obligations, which include the Strategic Export Licensing Criteria, the Arms Trade Treaty, the Geneva Conventions and the Genocide Convention. So can the Minister say whether the F-35 Joint Programme Office could control material movement based on part or number configuration, and would the UK consider raising with partner nations the need to temporarily suspend sales of parts to a nation that last night murdered several hundred civilians in Gaza? And can he say what the legal implications are for the government if it is concluded that the F-35s have been used to pursue war crimes, crimes against humanity, or indeed genocide against the Palestinians?
Sian Berry.
Thank you, Ms Jardine. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship today. And I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member for Leicester South for leading this debate. As members have mentioned today, as we discuss the UK's military collaboration with Israel, more than 400 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in the past 24 hours. We can see in real time the consequences of this collaboration and who is paying the price. Families in Gaza are searching for their loved ones amongst rubble. The dead lie wrapped in stained white sheets. These are the ones who've paid the price. And meanwhile, this government has been relentless in pushing for the continued export of UK-made parts for F-35s. Today, the Minister must confirm whether any of these warplanes were involved in the attack on Gaza last night, and will he confirm whether UK-made parts enabled any of the bombings in recent days? And if so, will he acknowledge the UK's direct role in marking the official collapse of an already fragile ceasefire? In September 2024, the government admitted Israel is not committed to complying with international humanitarian law, that there was a clear risk the UK arms exports might be used to commit serious illegal violations, and introduced a partial suspension of 29 arms export licences to Israel. But exempted from this move was the UK's most financially significant and deadly export, the components for the F-35 jets, including bomb release mechanisms, which are still made in my constituency, despite the City Council's rejection of the company's presence in our city. Moreover, since the original suspension, the government has issued at least a further 34 arms export licences to Israel. So can the Minister confirm that we have now issued more new licences than we suspended when that minimal measure was taken? Alongside deadly arms licences, the UK has outsourced more of its complicity to its overseas territories and military bases. For example, the UK's base in Cyprus has been used by the UK, US and Germany to supply Israel with weapons, personnel and intelligence since October 2023. Meanwhile, I understand Gibraltar has continuously provided harbour services to vessels involved in supplying energy and supplies to Israel, and ministers should confirm this today in response to members' questions. And in written questions, ministers have flatly refused to answer questions about whether RAF Shadow R1 flights from Akrotiri in Cyprus into Israeli airspace have been instructed to collect surveillance footage for the purposes of hostage rescue or for any other purpose. This means further written questions are now deemed out of order, and the government is escaping any scrutiny. Chair, the UK can either reaffirm its commitment to human rights as a nation that upholds democratic values, or it can continue to aid and abet a state whose human rights abuses extend now to genocidal actions. It cannot do both.
Imran Hussain. Oh, sorry, Brian Leishman.
Thank you very much, Chair. And yes, it is both an honour and a pleasure to serve under your chairship today, Mrs Jardine. And thanks go to the honourable member for Leicester South for securing this debate today. From the outset, let me be absolutely clear about what is happening. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have been slaughtered in Gaza. Women and children account for the vast majority of the dead. Entire families have been wiped from existence. And what is left for those who survive? Starvation, disease, Homes and hospitals turned to rubble and dust, and now renewed airstrikes. Just last night, over 400 Palestinians were killed in Israeli bombings. That's not defence. That's annihilation and the attempted eradication of a people. And we, the United Kingdom, have obligations. Obligations under the Genocide Convention, obligations under international law, obligations under the most basic principles of being human beings. We say we are committed to upholding international law, but what does our country actually do? The government approving more arms export licences to Israel than it has suspended. The continued use of RAF Akrotiri to assist the transfer of US military cargo to Israel. Surveillance flights over Gaza gathering intelligence that could be aiding in the targeting of Palestinian civilians. And when the International Court of Justice ruled that genocide is, quote-unquote, plausible, the government should have cut all military ties with Israel. Instead, it has chosen to continue arming and enabling a regime that conducts annexation, apartheid, ethnic cleansing and genocide.
Could my honourable friend give way?
I will do.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Prior to last night's devastating attack, Israel routinely broke the ceasefire agreement declared on the 19th of January, blocking aid, cutting off electricity and water supplies. Would my honourable friend agree that these acts of genocide need to be recognised as such by the international courts and the UK government as well?
I thank my honourable friend from Poole for his intervention, and I am in complete agreement. It's undeniable that these are war crimes, they're crimes against humanity, and it's acts of genocide. For every weapon part that the UK supplies, or every piece of intelligence we share, it makes us complicit. We must immediately suspend all arms sales, cease all military cooperation and impose economic and diplomatic sanctions, because anything less is just another stain on our history. An unforgivable betrayal of the Palestinian people, of who, let's be completely honest, we already owe a historical debt to. Mrs Jardine, I co-signed the letter to the Guardian newspaper from the Right Honourable Member for Islington North that called for an independent public inquiry on the UK's role in what has and continues to happen in Gaza. Many people are of the opinion that the government has taken decisions that breach international law, and these opinions won't be changed unless there is transparency and accountability.
Thank you. I'm afraid I'll have to impose a formal time limit of 3 minutes to get through everybody, please. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Ms Jardine, and I'm grateful to the member for Leicester South for securing this debate and the very authoritative way that he introduced it. Last night, 400 more people died in Gaza as a result of a direct bombardment in breach of the ceasefire, whilst at the same time Israel is denying access of food, water and supply of electricity to the people of Gaza, who are now going through the most ghastly time ever, on top of all the horrors they've been through in the past more than a year now, when so many, 69,000 are now known to be dead there, and more bodies are found every day that any rubble is cleared away. Those that survive will live forever with the survivors' guilt about how they survived when all their friends and family died around them. This is devastation beyond belief on live television all around the world, as we watch people being starved to death in front of our very eyes when there is food aplenty just a few kilometres away, deliberately denied to them by a decision of Israel. That is a war crime. And I think we just have to be quite clear about this. In the statement yesterday in the Chamber, in response to the G7 summit that the Foreign Secretary had attended, I asked this specific question about international law and the war crimes that I believe Israel has been committed, and he seemed to me to concede that Israel was indeed in breach of international law, and I think that is quite significant. Presumably there are many Foreign Office briefings going around saying that Israel is in breach of those laws. But that then leads to the second question. If we as a country knowingly accept that Israel is in breach of international law and continue to provide them
with the weapons under which people can be killed in Gaza, then we ourselves as a country also become complicit in breaches of international law. These laws are there for a purpose, and they were put there for a purpose to try to prevent genocide and prevent these crimes against humanity that are happening before our very eyes. Yes, of course.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, and he makes a powerful case. Will he agree with me that the situation now with regards to the international dimensions is so clear, with the ICJ investigating genocide, with the ICC investigating war crimes, even though they continue to be attacked for that? There is no room now for any nation to move away and deny the real serious international situation. And the second point he would agree with is that, frankly, silence also goes towards the issue around hypocrisy and double standards.
Very short on time, so if members could restrain from interventions in order to get through every speaker. Thank you.
I'll be very brief, Ms Jardine, because clearly we need to get through the debate and get the front benches up to speak. But I absolutely endorse what my honourable friend said there. And I attended the International Court of Justice hearing when South Africa presented an historic and absolutely brilliant case, and has led to that historic opinion being offered by the court. And I was also present in The Hague when we launched the Hague Declaration by a number of nations around the world who've dedicated themselves to diplomatically pursue the support for the ICJ and ICC decisions, but also to recognise that Israel is in breach of the Fourth Geneva Convention on the obligations on occupying powers in countries, and that obviously applies to Israel in the case of Gaza and the West Bank. And so the Hague Declaration is, I think, an important step forward. Specific points I'd be grateful if the Minister could answer. What exactly is going on at RAF Akrotiri? What was it that the Prime Minister on his visit there said he couldn't talk about, but there was lots of it going on? A very strange statement to make, a very strange comment to make on television at that time. Why are there so many flights going from Akrotiri to Israel? What is happening, as my friend from Leicester South pointed out, to the information collected by those overflying flights on Gaza? Is all the information collected going to be provided to the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice to pursue their investigations if they request it? The 300 licences that still exist have now been increased by another 34 that have recently been approved.
Thank you.
Chairship.
Thank you. Sorry, time's up.
Your time's up.
Sorry about that, but time's up. So if we could have Jim Shannon now, please.
Can I thank the member for Leicester South for raising the issue? He and I have a very different opinion on the issue, and he knows that. But the one thing we are committed to is to see a just peace and see that peace for the people in Gaza and Israel, and securing the hope of a different future for every child, regardless of race or religion in that area. That is my desire, and I know that to be the aim of this House. And this is something that I work towards. I speak as a friend of Israel, very much a friend of Israel, very proud to be a friend of Israel, will always be a friend of Israel, and will speak from that perspective. I must, however, also indicate there's a time for peace through strength. This is certainly what is needed. The facts of the matter are that Israel was mercilessly attacked. The hostage releases, and indeed the parading of infant bodies and coffins, highlight the mentality of those who carried out the October 7th atrocities. Some 1,200 killed, men, women and children, women raped, indescribable violence by Hamas terrorists. With Hamas, there is no remorse, that is clear. There's a clear hatred. And when you know where you stand, when you know the scorpion can sting, then you protect yourself. And that's what Israel does. Hamas can do nothing other than hate Israel and seek for her eradication. And I would never, ever support any calls for Israel to not have the means to defend herself, as she does and does rightly. I've lived through terrorism and the Troubles. I'm beyond thankful that my children have never checked below their car like their dad did, or been stopped at an army checkpoint. Don't remember the days of the bombs exploding and the pain of innocent victims who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't advocate for war when I felt the pain of it. However, I know that nations must retain an ability to show that it can and will defend its people when peace is no longer an option. Israel did not use its military prowess until atrocities were carried out on it. It is my hope that the time has come for a solution for Israel and the decent people of Gaza. And I will support this, but I will never attempt to bring Israel to the negotiating peace table with a hand tied behind their back, whilst acknowledging that the hatred of Hamas has not abated, and therefore neither has the threat to Israel. I want peace, but I want a lasting peace. And this will not happen whilst Hamas retain any control or ability to carry out their desire. This is the same Hamas terrorists, of course, who hid behind in schools and hospitals, hide behind women's skirts. That's the sort of terrorists that they are, Hamas. The rules cannot change, and those who hate Israel remain players in the game. Israel must have access to weapons and the support that they deserve, and also must have access to wise counsel to help provide a plan and a way forward. And I hope that this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland will continue to be a friend to Israel in word, wisdom and deed, as I am every day of my life, and indeed will be for the foreseeable future and every breath that I have in this world. Thank you.
Luke Akehurst, if you could possibly keep it brief, as you've had several interventions. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honour to serve under you as Chair, Ms Jardine. I want to thank the Honourable Member for Leicester South for securing this debate today and the sincerity of the remarks that he made. I know this is an issue that he cares deeply about. I refer Honourable Members to my register of financial interests. Recent months have seen dramatic shifts in global geopolitics, and I pay tribute to the Prime Minister for the leadership he has shown defending our country's alliances in uncertain times. These developments are a reminder of how important our country's defence and security relationships are. In the Middle East, we have deep and historic links both with Israel and much of the Arab world. The military cooperation between the UK and Israel helps keep our country safe. Over decades, Britain and Israel have conducted joint military exercises in areas like counter-terrorism, cybersecurity and defence technology. British troops have been kept safe thanks to cooperation with Israel's defence sector, particularly in unmanned aerial vehicles, missile defence and radar systems. The UK and Israel share intelligence on counter-terrorism and security threats posed by Iran, ISIS and other malign actors, both in the Middle East and at home. Indeed, it's my understanding what's actually been going on with the surveillance flights, that they are collecting intelligence relating to the hostages in Gaza, including Avinatan Orr, whose mother is British and has now been held captive for 528 days. I hope the Minister will be able to update us today on whether the UK will continue surveillance flights and to do everything we can to bring Avinatan home. UK-Israel defence cooperation strengthens our international alliances, most obviously through the F-35 programme, which some other honourable members have rather maligned today, which has created over 20,000 jobs in the UK. Can I ask for reassurance from the Minister there will be no change to the UK's participation in the F-35 programme, and that British-made parts will not be excluded from any of the other participants? Disrupting collaborative programmes that have been painstakingly negotiated over decades with multiple international partners, in this case a programme where we have a unique position as the only Tier 1 partner, would mean that we would not be trusted to be a reliable partner in future international collaborative programmes that are critical for our national security, our technological base and the future of our aerospace industry. And I'll finish by saying that military cooperation with Israel brings benefits to civilian populations in the Middle East, Israeli and Palestinian. Last year, when Iran launched unprecedented ballistic missile attacks against Israel, which could have killed Palestinians as well as Israelis, British jets and intelligence played their role in shooting them down, saving Israeli and Palestinian lives and avoiding a huge escalation that could have brought all-out war across the region. I look forward to hearing more from the Minister about how the government intends to strengthen our military cooperation with the Middle East's only democracy.
Thank you. I'm afraid we're out of time now, but if Brendan O'Hara would like to intervene perhaps on the Minister, can we have the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Helen Maguire, please?
Thank you, Ms Jardine, and it's an absolute pleasure to serve under your chairship for the first time, and I congratulate the member for Leicester South on securing this very important debate this afternoon. So I want to start by saying that the return of Israeli strikes on Gaza is horrific for all Palestinians, for the remaining hostages and their families, and indeed the world. We need a return to the ceasefire now. I thank the honourable member for raising so many points that I wasn't aware of, and it would be good to hear the Minister's response on these particular issues. On arms exports, as early as April 2024, the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey, called for the UK government to suspend arms exports to Israel. Today, I want to reaffirm that position. The UK must immediately halt all arms exports to Israel. During Foreign Office questions in October, our Liberal Democrat Foreign Affairs spokesperson pushed the Minister to agree that the UK should cease all arms exports to Israel. In response, the Minister talked around the issue and gave no clear response. This is unacceptable and we need decisive action, not evasion. Liberal Democrats have long championed tougher controls on UK arms exports to ensure that British-made weapons do not contribute to human rights violations, and we support a presumption of denial for arms exports to all governments listed in the FCDO's Human Rights and Democracy Report as human rights priorities, which includes Israel. Ultimately, the Liberal Democrats believe that only a political resolution based on a two-state solution can bring lasting peace, security and dignity to Palestinians and Israelis. Developments in recent weeks, however, have undermined efforts by moderates on both sides to maintain a ceasefire and move towards a durable peace in the region. The Israeli government's decision to block the supply of aid into Gaza and its cutting of the electricity supply are unlawful and must be condemned unequivocally. It's crucial that we see a return to the ceasefire, its conditions respected by all sides and negotiations advance to agree on Phase 2. Electricity and essential supplies must flow into Gaza to alleviate the immense human suffering. Blocking aid threatens the lives of the millions of Gazans dependent on humanitarian assistance after the destruction of the past 17 months. The UK government must apply pressure to ensure a return to a ceasefire and supplies must resume without delay. Hamas must also move immediately to release the remaining hostages, including the bodies of those killed in captivity. The treatment of hostages at the hands of Hamas, both in captivity and during their release, has been despicable. It's also clear that the expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank is illegal and fuelling further tension, undermining the efforts of Israeli and Palestinian moderates to move towards peace. The government must outline concrete steps to put pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to address rising settler violence and the illegal expansions. Inaction on this issue must end. The Liberal Democrats have called for a ban on the import of goods from illegal settlements. An increasing number of our allies, including Spain, Norway and Ireland, have formally recognised a Palestinian state. It's also now time that the UK joins them. Recognition of Palestine on 1967 lines would send a strong signal that we are committed to a two-state solution and supporting the work of Israel and Palestinian moderates to this end. Given the calls by far-right Israeli ministers such as Smotrich for the annexation of the West Bank, the urgency of this recognition cannot be overstated. President Trump's return to the White House adds further layers of complexity and urgency. His reckless comments on the future of Gaza, including suggestions that Palestinians should be removed from the Strip, have inflamed tensions further. And it is crucial that the UK steps up and pushes for a diplomatic resolution that recognises both an Israeli and a Palestinian state. Recognising Palestine will also inject hope into the Palestinian society that having their own state is possible, which in turn would help wrestle control back from the extreme actors at the edges of Palestinian society. In conclusion, the UK must have a principled and strategic approach, halt arms exports to Israel, hold all parties accountable under international law and champion a two-state solution. This government must stop ducking these critical issues and take a stronger stance, one that can contribute to a just and lasting peace. Thank you.
Thank you. Opposition spokesperson Mark Francois.
Thank you very much, Mrs Jardine. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship in Westminster Hall this afternoon. In accordance with parliamentary tradition, can I congratulate the new member for Leicester South in securing this important debate this afternoon. As I understand it, he is a graduate of the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology. So I hope he'll appreciate it if I make a few points in my speech about the defence-related events which have taken place recently at some British universities. Perhaps I could begin by making some general comments about the situation in Gaza, as raised by several honourable members this afternoon. I was on the front bench in the House of Commons on Thursday the 16th of January 2025, when the Foreign Secretary delivered the statement to Parliament concerning the ceasefire deal. Clearly, the events overnight, including the bombing of targets in Gaza, are very concerning, as several honourable members this afternoon have already highlighted. The release of the remaining 59 hostages held by Hamas since the atrocities of October the 7th is key to a sustainable end to the conflict in Gaza and to building a better future. The British government should be directly involved in efforts to find a way through this very difficult moment. and the international community must also reiterate there can be no role for Hamas in Gaza's future. The Foreign Secretary argued back in January that the only viable long-term settlement of this issue is via a two-state solution, which would permit the creation of a credible Palestinian state, not under Hamas control, alongside an Israel with secure borders, free from terrorist attack. This has long been my view too. We all want to see an end to the suffering in the Middle East, and in Gaza in particular. But I do believe it is only via a two-state solution that this can ultimately be achieved. With regard to the defence industry, as referred to by the honourable member for Leicester South, we on these benches do believe it is necessary to retain a viable defence manufacturing base in the United Kingdom, both for strategic reasons and also because the defence industry plays a vital role in ensuring the prosperity of the United Kingdom. In economic terms, the trade body Aerospace, Defence and Space, or ADS, estimates that in the year 2022-23, defence work contributed approximately £38.2 billion to the United Kingdom economy, with exports reaching £38.7 billion. In the same year, ADS also estimated that the defence, aerospace, security and space sectors combined supported 427,500 direct jobs. In addition, it is worth recording today the UK's defence industry has been a key supplier in providing equipment for the defence of Ukraine. For example, the new light anti-tank weapon, NLAW, was used very effectively by Ukrainian troops in the defence of Kyiv in the first days of the full-scale Russian invasion in February 2022. Not only were many of those weapons manufactured in Belfast, but for years Britain had been training Ukrainian troops following the first invasion of Ukraine, including Crimea, in 2014. It was a combination of British military training and British supplied equipment that helped to prevent Russia overrunning the capital of Ukraine in the first few days of that invasion. Indeed, it's probably true to say that had we not provided the Ukrainians with those NLAWs and, crucially, trained them in how to use them in complex anti-tanks ambushes, the Russians would probably be having dinner in Kyiv this evening. There's an inscription on the Korean War Memorial in Washington which says quite simply, freedom isn't free. That freedom has to be defended, and in a modern world that requires military technology to do so. And whilst I can understand the passion of the honourable gentleman for Leicester South in this debate, which he has articulated today, I would say to him, most respectfully, that he is able to make these arguments in a democratic forum and to criticise the government of the day publicly because he's fortunate to live in a parliamentary democracy. That's not something we can say of all of the countries in the Middle East. Moreover, yesterday saw the death, aged 105, of the last remaining Battle of Britain fighter pilot, Group Captain John Paddy Hemingway, DFC. We pay tribute to his brave service in Parliament today. Importantly, had we not had a defence industry in 1940 manufacturing Spitfires and Hurricanes, and this debate at Westminster this afternoon will not even be taking place. So we need a defence industry, madam, and we need people who are allowed at university freely to choose to enter it without fear of intimidation.
Thank you. Minister Pollard.
Thank you, Chair. And can I say I'm grateful for the Honourable Member for Leicester South for calling this debate and the way in which he opened it with his questions. I'll try to respond to all the points he raised, but combined with the questions from Honourable Members, if I miss one out, I'm happy writing to him at the end of it to make sure that we cover off all those points. I'm sure we were all united this morning by our collective disappointment at the developments overnight. And so let me be very clear. The reported civilian casualties resulting from Israel's actions last night are appalling. We do not want to see a return to fighting. More bloodshed is in no one's interest. Our priority is encouraging all parties to return urgently to dialogue and ensure the ceasefire agreement is implemented in full and becomes permanent. Peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians lies down the path of a proper and respected ceasefire. It lies down the path of releasing the hostages and restoring humanitarian aid. And ultimately, it lies down the path of a two-state solution. So we will step up our work with partners across the region to restore aid and secure the release of the hostages through negotiation. Humanitarian aid should never be used as a political tool. Israel must restart the flow of aid immediately. And we're grateful for the governments of Egypt and Qatar for the important role they're playing in facilitating the hostage release negotiations, as well as the King of Jordan for his efforts to increase humanitarian assistance into Gaza. We will all have welcomed the release of 38 hostages so far, including Emily Damari and Eli Sharabi, and our thoughts are with those still waiting to be reunited with their loved ones. And I repeat our calls for all hostages' immediate release and for a surge of humanitarian aid into Gaza. I now turn to the subject of the debate, our military cooperation with Israel. The UK shares an important, long-standing and broad strategic partnership with the State of Israel. Our defence partnership with Israel aims to support the security of an important partner and reduce tensions in the wider region. It incorporates a range of defence engagement activity, including defence education, joint training and capability development. But in terms of our military cooperation, as mentioned by the Honourable Member for North Durham, the role our RAF played to thwart Iran's coordinated missile and drone attack on Israel in April 2024 and again in October 2024 demonstrated our commitment to Israel's security and our commitment to de-escalate regional tensions. As the House has been updated previously, in the aftermath of the shocking attacks on October 7th, the RAF conducted unarmed surveillance flights over the eastern Mediterranean, including in airspace over Israel and Gaza. I can reassure honourable members, because I believe it was raised by a number, including the member for Brighton Pavilion, that these are solely in support of hostage rescue, and only information relating to hostage rescue can be passed to the relevant authority for hostage rescue. We would only pass information where we are satisfied that it will be used in accordance with international humanitarian law. As in the past, and as with other nations, any future defence activity with Israel would be subject to a rigorous overseas security and justice assistant assessment to assess compliance with human rights obligations and international humanitarian law. Whilst we recognise and respect Israel's right to defend itself following October the 7th and condemn the brutal attacks by Hamas in the strongest possible terms, we have had and continue to have concerns around Israel's conduct. The Prime Minister and UK government ministers continue to raise these concerns with their Israeli counterparts. The Foreign Secretary has visited Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories 3 times since taking office, most recently in January, and has pressed for a ceasefire and adherence to international humanitarian law, the return of hostages and a broader resolution. We are clear that the remaining hostages must be released and the way to return them safely is through a deal. All parties, including Israel, must observe international humanitarian law. And as the Foreign Secretary has said, we urge Israel to lift aid restrictions immediately and restore the supply of humanitarian assistance that the people of Gaza so desperately need. The Liberal Democrat spokesperson raised the issue of around the West Bank as well. We recognise Israel's right to defend itself and the continuing threat posed by armed groups, but Israel must provide civilians and show restraint to ensure the scale and conduct of its operations are proportionate with the threat posed. The Foreign Secretary has raised our concerns around Israeli operations in the West Bank with the Israeli Foreign Minister, and our position remains that Israel actions must be in accordance with international humanitarian law in the West Bank as well as in operations in Gaza. Please, yeah.
Yesterday, the Foreign Secretary admitted that Israel was breaking international law. Therefore, does the Minister acknowledge that Israel's actions and our government's refusal to act against them, including the refusal to ban all sales of weapons, will be watched carefully by rogue states such as Russia and will be used as a template for actions which are or are not allowed on the international stage?
Thank you for the intervention. Our position remains that Israel's actions in Gaza are at a clear risk of breaching international humanitarian law, and we'll continue to raise our concerns with Israel in relation to that. I do want to quickly get onto the arms exports issue that was raised by the member for Leicester South before I conclude. Over recent years, UK arms exports have accounted for less than 1% of total defence exports to Israel. And as honourable members will be aware, when my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, took office in July 24, he ordered a review of Israel's compliance with international humanitarian law. And on the 2nd of September, he concluded there was a clear risk that UK exports to Israel for use in military operations in Gaza could be used to commit or facilitate serious violations, at which point my right honourable friend, the Business and Trade Secretary, took the decision to suspend relevant export licences to Israel. I'm going to make progress if I can, because I've only got a few moments left, if that's all right. As honourable members are aware, this does not include exports of components around the global F-35 programme. As previously set out to Parliament, it was necessary to exclude exports to the F-35 programme from the scope of the suspension because of the programme's broader strategic role in NATO and wider implications for international peace and security. And while the UK government's support to Israel remains steadfast in the face of aggression and terrorism, it is clear that we must and do have a robust export licensing regime, and that we keep all licences under close and continual review. Now, the issue of overseas territories has been raised for operational security reasons, and as a matter of long-standing policy, the MOD neither confirms or denies nor comments on any foreign national military aircraft movement or operations within UK airspace or on our UK overseas bases. Chair, to conclude, events overnight are a major setback. We want to see the fighting stop. I think that's shared by all members who spoke in the debate today. The ceasefire must be re-established, a return to dialogue must be achieved, and the remaining hostages must be released. A surge of aid must be delivered to the people of Gaza. And whilst the challenge is much greater today than it was yesterday, we will continue to work alongside allies and partners towards those goals and a two-state solution that delivers security for Israelis, dignity for Palestinians, and a lasting peace in the region. I'd be happy to have a further conversation with the honourable member for the points I didn't get to because of the shortness of the remarks, but I'm happy picking that up outside this debate.
Thank you. Shaukat Adam to wind up.
Thank you, Ms Jardine, to honourable members for all their sincere contribution. I just want to add a couple of points. Firstly, regarding the release of hostages, which we all want to see released. But this was a quote from the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, which said the Israeli government has chosen to give up the hostages. And also, in our shadow minister, I agree with the defence industry. We must have a robust arms industry too. But I do pray our children's lives are never at the behest of an economic profit of a nation. Madam Chair, colleagues, history will judge us not by our words but by our actions. So let me be completely clear. This debate is not an attack on our government, nor is it about politics. It is simply about truth. Because only truth can serve justice, and only with justice can we bring about peace. So I urge this hall to reflect not on any political loyalties, but on a moral duty. Because when history looks back at this particular moment in time, we must be able to say with absolute certainty that we stood on the right side. That is the least we owe to Shaban and Hind and all the dead children of this conflict. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is that this House has considered military collaboration with Israel. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order. The sitting stands adjourned.